The morning sun crept weakly across the camp, bringing a pale light to the barracks, where the German women stirred from their restless sleep, their bodies stiff from nights on thin cots, the air heavy with the lingering scent of last night's meager meal. The ordinary sounds of movement echoed strangely against the bare walls, as if the barracks itself was uncertain of what today might bring. The women exchanged cautious glances, each step tentative, their senses heightened by months of deprivation and strict routines. Anticipation mingled with disbelief as rumors whispered among them of an unexpected treat. The idea seemed absurd, yet impossible to ignore. They moved through the narrow hallways, stepping lightly on worn wooden floors. Every creak, a reminder of their confinement, each footfall measured as if careful movement could somehow influence what was to come outside the barracks. The smell of fresh-baked goods wafted through the air, faint yet unmistakable, a strange scent that did not belong to the typical ration bread or stale crackers. The aroma carried with it a tension, impossible to articulate, curiosity and disbelief intertwining in every racing heartbeat. Every woman paused at doorways, peering through small cracks and gaps, noting the reactions of others and wondering if the sense of abundance was genuine or a cruel illusion designed to provoke hope, only to snatch it away. In the courtyard, a line of tables had been set up under the faint morning light, and upon them rows of brownies and cups of chocolate milk gleamed, their surfaces smooth, rich, and inviting. The sight caused a ripple of astonishment among the women, their eyes wide and movements hesitant. No one moved forward. Immediately, the air was thick, with unspoken questions and subtle calculations, each woman weighing the reality of the treat against the improbability of it. The guards watched silently, not with stern authority, but with a calm presence that made the scene feel surreal. Every step closer to the tables felt like crossing a boundary into a realm where ordinary expectation met extraordinary circumstance. The first woman tentatively picked up a brownie, feeling the warmth and texture between her fingers, almost afraid to bite into it, as though fear of disappointment could ruin the experience. She glanced at the other women whose eyes followed her every move, their expressions a mix of astonishment, disbelief, and curiosity. She took a cautious bite, the rich chocolate melting smoothly across her tongue, a sensation almost overwhelming. The ordinary act of eating had become extraordinary, every chew measured, every swallow layered with surprised delight, and a subtle tension born of uncertainty about the implications of this abundance. As more women approached the tables, each experienced a similar cascade of astonishment and cautious indulgence. The brownies were sweet, rich, and soft, unlike anything rationed in months, the chocolate milk creamy and smooth, a stark contrast to thin, watery substitutes they had learned to tolerate. The ordinary act of nourishment had transformed into a sensory explosion, almost shocking in its unexpected richness. The women shared fleeting glances and soft murmurs of disbelief, each silent acknowledgement layered with questions of trust, observation, and subtle negotiation with the environment and the guards present. Some women hesitated, lingering at the edges of the crowd, watching others indulge, noting reactions, expressions, and subtle gestures, cataloging every detail in the mind, every ordinary action becoming extraordinary observation, every movement a potential signal about trust, safety, and adaptation. The smell of chocolate and the sight of rich brown sugar creations carried an almost hypnotic allure, drawing even the most cautious forward. Yet the undercurrent of doubt remained, each bite layered with astonishment and subtle calculation about what it meant to receive unexpected abundance in captivity. The women began to gather in small clusters, sharing whispers, observations, and small bites. Each interaction a careful dance between indulgence and awareness. Every glance noted, every gesture cataloged, the ordinary act of sharing food transformed into an intricate web of subtle psychological negotiation. The taste of chocolate, rich and sweet, seemed almost impossible to reconcile with the months of deprivation. The mind cataloged sensations, The body responded instinctively yet cautiously, every woman aware that the ordinary pleasure of dessert carried with it layers of meaning, observation, and anticipation. As the morning progressed, the women became bolder, tasting more brownies, drinking more chocolate milk. Each experience layered with wonder, astonishment, and subtle psychological adjustment. The ordinary act of consuming food became an arena of social observation, each interaction catalogued and interpreted. Each glance exchanged a subtle signal of understanding, curiosity, or caution. The air hummed with anticipation as the ordinary environment of the camp was quietly transformed by the introduction of sweetness, warmth, and unexpected care. The women moved through the courtyard like explorers navigating, an unfamiliar landscape, every step and bite recorded in memory and analysis. A few women lingered near the tables, noting subtle details, the texture of the brownies, the thickness of the milk, the arrangement of the cups and plates, every detail catalogued. In mind for later discussion and observation, the ordinary objects and substances became extraordinary objects of fascination, analysis, and quiet debate, each moment laden with both pleasure and subtle tension. The sensory overload combined with months of deprivation made every ordinary taste an extraordinary event, every glance a negotiation of curiosity and caution. Evening fell and the women returned to their barracks, their minds buzzing with the experience, the ordinary act of returning. To cots layered with reflection, anticipation, and subtle negotiation of social dynamics, each woman replayed the sensations of the day, the taste, the texture, the warmth, the sweetness, every sensation catalogued for meaning, reflection, and subtle psychological. Processing the extraordinary experience of brownies and chocolate milk had transformed ordinary routines into a layered landscape of astonishment, curiosity, and strategic observation. Throughout the night, soft whispers moved through the barracks, reflections of astonishment and disbelief mingling with subtle analysis and quiet anticipation. Each ordinary act of sleeping, listening, and observing became an exercise in mental endurance, observation, and cataloging every sound, noted every movement, interpreted every sensation layered with meaning and consequence. The women understood instinctively that even the simplest pleasures now carried extraordinary psychological weight, requiring careful observation, subtle negotiation, and thoughtful reflection. The following morning, the women awoke to a renewed sense of anticipation. Each ordinary act of rising, washing, and moving through the barracks layered with memory of the previous day's extraordinary indulgence. Every sensation catalogued, every glance remembered, every gesture interpreted. The experience of chocolate and brownies had shifted perception, every ordinary moment now viewed through the lens of unexpected abundance. Sensory delight and subtle social dynamics, the women approached the day cautiously aware that even ordinary pleasures could carry layers of significance, observation, and consequence. In the courtyard, the tables awaited, once again lined with brownies and chocolate milk. The women approached more confidently, yet with the same careful calculation, each ordinary bite layered with astonishment, curiosity, and subtle negotiation. Every glance catalogued every movement, observed every subtle shift, noted. The ordinary act of eating transformed into a complex dance of observation, social awareness, and psychological adaptation. Every moment a negotiation of trust, curiosity, and the extraordinary potential of simple pleasures. The morning arrived pale and uncertain, the barracks filled with soft murmurs and quiet anticipation. The memory of yesterday's brownies and chocolate milk still lingered like a sweet echo in every mind. Each woman stirred cautiously, testing the warmth of the thin blanket under her fingers, the ordinary sensation of rising from the cot now layered with subtle tension, curiosity, and recollection of the extraordinary event. The air smelled faintly of wood and dust, but underneath that faint aroma lingered the memory of chocolate sweetness. Anticipation thrummed quietly in each heartbeat, a nervous excitement that made every ordinary movement feel charged with possibility. In the corridor, the women moved slowly, their footsteps measured, every creak of the floor amplifying caution and awareness. The lingering memory of yesterday's treats created a sense of wonder that tinged every glance and gesture each woman catalogued. Reactions of others noting subtle shifts in expression, posture, and movement. Every ordinary action now carried extraordinary significance. The sense of anticipation felt almost tangible, every glance toward the courtyard. Every whisper shared between women layered with unspoken questions about what awaited them today and whether the extraordinary could be repeated. Stepping into the courtyard, the women were met with the same line of tables neatly arranged with brownies and cups of chocolate milk. The sight sparked a ripple of astonishment, disbelief, and excitement through the group. Some women froze momentarily in awe, each pausing to take in the sight as if questioning reality. Every ordinary object transformed into an emblem of abundance, care, and the impossible possibilities that had emerged. In their constrained existence, the air seemed to hum with anticipation. Every movement measured as if crossing the threshold into this unexpected realm carried weight beyond the simple act of eating. The first to approach tentatively picked up a brownie, feeling the texture smooth and soft between her fingers. She hesitated, almost afraid to bite, as if savoring it too quickly might shatter the fragile reality of this abundance. The other women watched silently, each movement catalogued, every bite noted, every expression interpreted for cues of safety, enjoyment, and trust. The ordinary act of consuming food became an extraordinary psychological exercise, each sensation layered with astonishment, memory, and subtle calculation of how to navigate the abundance while maintaining caution. As more women moved forward, the reactions varied. Astonishment and delight mingled with skepticism and quiet tension. Some women consumed their brownies quickly, savoring every bite with wide eyes, while others nibbled, cautiously studying each movement of their peers. Each action a silent negotiation with both the environment and fellow prisoners. Every glance catalogued, every gesture interpreted, every soft exhale of pleasure weighed for meaning. And intent, the ordinary act of eating was now intertwined with observation strategy and subtle social dynamics. A few women lingered at the edges of the group, watching the interactions, noting the reactions of guards and peers, cataloging each expression. For clues to the intent behind this generosity, the brownies and chocolate milk became symbols of a larger psychological landscape. The simple sweetness, a test, a gesture of trust, a moment of shared humanity, the ordinary sensory experience of taste, became a layered exercise in observation, reflection, and social navigation. Every movement and gesture carrying weight beyond its immediate function, each sip of chocolate milk, a delicate balance of indulgence and awareness. The morning unfolded with women sharing brownies and chocolate milk in small clusters, soft murmurs of astonishment filling the air. Each interaction a careful negotiation of observation and adaptation. Each bite and sip catalogued mentally as a study in trust, reaction, and subtle social cues. The ordinary act of consuming food became a tool for understanding and adapting to a world suddenly layered with unexpected abundance. Every glance exchanged, every soft whisper, a subtle communication of delight, astonishment, and tentative connection. By mid-morning, the women began to move with more confidence, yet still with careful attention to detail, each ordinary movement now layered with awareness of social dynamics, subtle psychological signaling, and personal reflection. The extraordinary experience of yesterday had reshaped their perception of the camp, every bite of brownie, every sip of chocolate milk. A reminder that even in captivity, small wonders could disrupt expectations and spark subtle recalibrations of trust, curiosity, and social strategy. Some women began experimenting with combinations, tasting chocolate milk before brownies, savoring the texture. The richness, the smoothness of flavors, the ordinary act of sampling became an extraordinary exploration of sensory delight, observation, and subtle competition as each woman compared experiences and reactions, cataloged responses, and interpreted subtle signals from peers. The environment ordinary in function, yet extraordinary in consequence transformed. Each gesture, each movement into a careful negotiation of sensation, curiosity, and psychological engagement. Laughter began to ripple quietly among the women. Small bursts of astonished amusement at the richness of the taste, the softness of the brownies, and the creaminess of the chocolate milk, the ordinary act. Of amusement now laden with psychological significance, each chuckle catalogued, every smile observed and interpreted as a signal of trust, delight, and tentative connection among the group. The sweetness carried both sensory pleasure and an undercurrent of social complexity, each bite a test, each sip a silent conversation. Afternoon brought new layers of interaction. The women formed small groups comparing experiences, cataloging sensations, and reflecting on the extraordinary generosity of the guards. The ordinary act of conversation transformed into subtle negotiations of social position awareness and trust. Every word chosen with care, every glance noted, every gesture observed for hidden meaning. The brownies and chocolate milk had become more than food. They were symbols of disruption, astonishment, and the potential for connection in a world previously defined by scarcity and observation. Evening approached with soft light filtering through the barracks windows. The women returned to their cots, minds buzzing with memories and reflection of the day. Each ordinary action of lying down, resting, and observing transformed into layered contemplation of sensory experience, social dynamics, and subtle psychological analysis. The taste of chocolate milk, the richness of the brownies, the shared experience of astonishment, all catalogued for meaning and future reflection, every sound, every movement, every fleeting glance, noted for layers of significance. Throughout the night, whispers moved through the barracks, small murmurs of astonishment, disbelief, and reflection, blending with subtle analysis of social interactions and personal reactions. Every ordinary act of listening, observing, and reflecting became an extraordinary exercise in endurance, awareness, and subtle social negotiation. Each soft footstep or quiet breath layered with meaning and consequence, the women cataloged every detail of the sensory and social landscape to prepare for the following day, anticipating more surprises, more insights, and the extraordinary potential of ordinary pleasures. The following morning, a sense of anticipation hung heavy in the air. The women moved through the barracks with heightened awareness. Each ordinary action of washing, dressing, and preparing for breakfast layered with memory, reflection, and subtle calculation. The brownies and chocolate milk had altered perception every step. Every glance, every gesture now viewed through the lens of the extraordinary. In the midst of the ordinary, the women approached the courtyard with a mixture of confidence, curiosity, and cautious anticipation, aware that each ordinary bite and sip carried layers of meaning, observation, and social negotiation. As they gathered at the tables, the line of brownies and cups of chocolate milk awaited them once again. The women approached with measured excitement, each bite and sip now layered with memory, reflection, and heightened awareness of peer reactions and subtle psychological signals. Each ordinary act of eating transformed into a careful study of sensation, trust, and social navigation. The chocolate and sweetness a lens through which they examined themselves, each other, and the world around them, a simple taste carrying profound implications. The dawn broke pale and hesitant across the camp, the barracks filled with soft murmurings and shifting shadows. The women stirred from sleep, their minds still alive with memories of sweetness and warmth. Each ordinary stretch of limbs felt layered. With cautious anticipation, the memory of brownies and chocolate milk hovered like a delicate echo in every thought, every sensation. Catalogued with heightened awareness, the ordinary act of rising became a careful negotiation of expectation, reflection, and subtle psychological calculation. Each step through the wooden floors measured every creak, amplified curiosity and cautious excitement. As they moved toward the courtyard, The women exchanged glances loaded with unspoken questions. Each glance cataloged every reaction, observed every micro-expression, interpreted for intent and emotional state. The tables awaited them lined once again with brownies and cups of chocolate milk. The sight provoked a mixture of astonishment, anticipation, and subtle tension. The ordinary objects now carried extraordinary symbolic weight, a test, a reward, a gesture of human care and unexpected generosity. Each woman moved with measured steps, aware that every gesture, every glance might carry layered meaning. The first woman reached for a brownie, her fingers trembling slightly as she lifted it, feeling the smooth, soft texture between her hands, the scent rich and inviting. The first bite was a quiet explosion of sensation, sweetness, and richness mingling. With disbelief, each chew cataloged for memory and reflection. The ordinary act of eating became an extraordinary psychological experience, every swallow layered with astonishment, delight, and subtle tension as she glanced at her peers, noting reactions and micro-expressions, each bite a silent conversation with the environment and the women around her. The others followed cautiously, some moving forward eagerly, while others lingered at the edges studying reactions, cataloging sensations, and observing for subtle cues of intent and social dynamics. Every ordinary action now charged with meaning, every glance and gesture, a micro-negotiation of trust and curiosity. The chocolate milk, creamy, smooth, and warm, carried with it an emotional weight that transcended mere taste. Each sip a reminder of abundance, subtle care, and the extraordinary contrast to deprivation. Memory small groups formed spontaneously, the women sharing whispers, observations, and measured bites, every interaction, a delicate negotiation of social dynamics and psychological adaptation. Each ordinary conversation layered with astonishment, subtle analysis, and curiosity. The brownies and chocolate milk had become more than food. They were symbols of unexpected humanity, generosity, and the complex negotiation of trust and observation. Every bite, every sip, every glance cataloged for meaning and future reflection. As the morning progressed, the women moved more confidently, yet each gesture carefully measured, each movement layered with heightened awareness, observation, and reflection. The ordinary act of consuming food transformed into a study of sensation, social hierarchy, and psychological endurance. Each glance exchanged every whisper, noted every small laugh, analyzed for meaning. The chocolate and sweetness carried a dual significance, pleasure and subtle tension as the women navigated the extraordinary within the ordinary. Afternoon brought a pause, the women lingering near tables, observing the environment, noting subtle details, the texture of the brownies, the consistency of the chocolate milk, the arrangement of cups and plates. Every ordinary object now infused with extraordinary significance. Each gesture cataloged each glance, interpreted the simple act of touching, tasting, and observing became a delicate balance of indulgence and psychological negotiation. Each woman aware that ordinary sensations now carried extraordinary social and emotional consequences. Some women moved toward the corners of the courtyard, observing peers, cataloging reactions, studying subtle cues and micro-expressions. The ordinary act of watching became a layered exercise in social awareness and strategic observation. Each movement noted every smile, every hesitant bite, every glance recorded in memory as a signal of trust, delight, or caution. The extraordinary nature of the environment had transformed each mundane moment into an arena of observation, adaptation, and subtle social calculation. Evening descended the barracks, slowly filling with shadows and soft murmurs. Each woman returned to her cot, mind buzzing with the sensory, emotional, and social layers of the day. The ordinary act of lying down, resting, and reflecting became a psychological exercise, cataloging every sensation, every interaction, every glance and gesture for meaning. The brownies and chocolate milk had shifted perception, transforming ordinary actions into extraordinary exercises in awareness, reflection, and subtle social strategy. Through the night whispers moved softly through the barracks, reflections of astonishment, disbelief, and quiet analysis mingled with anticipation. For the next day, every ordinary sound, every movement, every soft breath became laden with meaning, observation, and subtle negotiation. The women cataloged every detail of the sensory landscape and each micro-interaction, preparing for another day of extraordinary, ordinary experiences layered with psychological and social complexity. The next morning, the women awoke with a subtle mix of expectation and cautious delight. Every ordinary movement of washing, dressing, and preparing for breakfast now framed by memory, reflection, and heightened awareness. The anticipation of brownies and chocolate milk carried a weight of psychological and social significance. Every step measured, every glance noted, every gesture observed, catalogued, and interpreted. The ordinary act of approaching the courtyard became a carefully navigated psychological landscape of memory, expectation, and subtle social negotiation. The tables awaited once again, brownies lined up neatly and cups of chocolate milk creamy and inviting. Each woman approached with layered anticipation, curiosity, and cautious calculation, each bite and sip. Now a combination of sensory pleasure, astonishment, and careful observation. Every glance catalogued, every reaction noted, every gesture interpreted as a potential signal of trust, delight, or social alignment. The ordinary act of consuming food became a study in psychological endurance, observation, and social navigation. Throughout the day, the women discussed quietly in small groups the surprising abundance, the taste, the textures, and the emotional impact of the treats. Each conversation, a delicate negotiation of insight, observation, and social awareness. Every word chosen carefully, every glance noted, every gesture interpreted for subtle cues and hidden meaning. The brownies and chocolate milk had become symbols of both delight and a complex psychological landscape that demanded constant awareness, reflection, and social navigation. By late afternoon, the women moved with subtle confidence, navigating the courtyard with awareness, cataloging reactions, observing micro-expressions, and engaging in quiet, reflective discussion, each ordinary movement, layered with memory, expectation, and careful observation. The extraordinary nature of the treats had transformed simple acts into exercises of adaptation, awareness, and subtle negotiation. Every glance, every gesture, every bite, a careful calibration of trust, observation, and reflection. As evening approached, the women returned to the barracks, minds alive with reflection, cataloging the day's events. The ordinary act of resting, lying down, and preparing for sleep became an extraordinary exercise in mental endurance, observation, and reflection. Every breath, every sound, every shadow analyzed for significance. The chocolate and brownies continued to resonate in their thoughts, layered with astonishment, delight, and subtle analysis of social dynamics and personal response. Through the night whispers flowed soft and cautious reflections of astonishment, disbelief, and quiet analysis mingled with anticipation. Each ordinary sound, every soft movement catalogued for meaning, observation, and subtle negotiation. Every sensation noted, every glance remembered. Each bite and sip replayed mentally. The women prepared for another day of extraordinary, ordinary experiences where simple treats carried profound emotional, psychological, and social consequences.